Hey guys, very welcome to this session on the future of cyber threat intelligence and how we can leverage AI and machine learning to counter that, right? So let's get going. In today's, hyper connected world that we live in with a multitude of devices and multitude of applications which are totally based upon the internet, we constantly face a threat from the cyber world, so to say, right? And there are these organized sort of activities known as hacking and uh, similar phishing and such things, which we constantly have to guard ourselves against, right? Else we stand to sort of lose a lot, right? In that sense, monetarily, maybe even reputation, maybe even our image can be sort of, ruptured in that sense, right? So, it is not just a thing of like a futuristic thing or something, not that is something that is not impacting us. It is affecting each and every one of us, and more so when we are working in an organization, in an enterprise like scenario, where what happens is the entire business of the organization may be happening over the internet, right? And if the systems and the servers and the data gets compromised, then the organization stands to lose a lot as such, right? So we will see some examples of that during this actual session, but let me in this next couple of minutes just give you a brief idea of what all we are going to cover during this session on this topic of the future of cyber threat intelligence and how we can leverage AI and machine learning as a countermeasure to really protect ourselves against it, right? So let's go, let's get going, right? Right. So, as I said, this is a webinar on this topic as such, right? But to put things in context and in perspective, what I normally like to do would be to give it a futuristic outlook, so to say, right? So what that means is we need to put ourselves in a situation in which we are actually in the future, actually in the future, and we also need to take examples from somebody who has already been in the future, and learn from there, or try to map our current scenario with a futuristic scenario and see to what factors are going to really help us in protecting ourselves as such, right? So the best example that I can think of for this purpose is that of the Starship Enterprise, the main space vessel of Captain Spock and I mean, sorry, Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock as such. I'm so sorry. But yeah, this is based upon the Star Trek series that was, uh, uh, aired on the national television, I think in the 1980s and maybe early 90s as such, right? But it is so very futuristic that I enjoy watching that even today, right? So it airs on one of the popular OTTs, and you may want to just watch it if you have not already, if you have not done that any time before, right? It's very interesting stuff there, right? Very, very futuristic, even by today's standards. It is pretty futuristic in that sense, right? So what we're going to do is we'll try to first understand the basics of cyber threats and some mechanisms in which cyber threats happen, and then we are also going to from a perspective of cyber threat intelligence, how do we develop that intelligence? What are the tools that we can use? How we can use these tools, right? How, what are the best practices, sort of thing in the industry? We'll touch upon these things, and we will also see from the perspective of Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, a conversation between them in, like, a very distinguished lingo that is popular between these two mega stars, so to say, and we'll try to understand from that perspective, right? So let's sort of get going, and as in the words of Star Trek, so to say, let's engage our logical minds as we boldly go where no cybersecurity training or webinar has ever gone before as such, right? So that is what we are going to touch upon. Now, what is cyber threat intelligence, right? In that sense, first of all, what is cyber threat by itself, right? What is a cyber threat, right? So a cyber threat refers to any potential or actual, I mean, potential may turn into actual malicious activity that seeks to compromise the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of a computer system, network, or the data as such, right? So anything that is going to get sort of impacted by any of these things is potentially done by a cyber threat as such, right? A threat in that sense, right? So the threats are perpetrated, right? Who does it, right? They could be individuals, or there could be a group of individuals, or there could be a country by itself. We know countries that do that. The countries, I don't want to name them, but there are certain countries that engage in such nefarious activities where they hack the servers of other countries and try to paralyze the economic activity and the daily life of people in that country as such, right? So there are countries as well, there are groups of hackers, there are malicious organizations. The organizations themselves want to impact other organizations which may be their competitors as such. So we don't know where this particular threat is coming from. It could be by an individual or a group or group with malicious intent, or cyber criminals, or state-sponsored actors. Right? Country itself is sponsoring this activity as such. Right? So let's not get into the political aspect of it. Let's try to first understand the technological or technical aspect of it. Right? So cyber threats come in various forms and can target different aspects of a digital system. They could target the data, they could target the operations, they could target the networks, they could target anything about just about anything as such, right? They could even target the customers of that organization as such, right? So just as the technology has evolved, the cyber threats are also evolving. Threats are not the same that were 10 years ago, right? Threats have been around from day one of internet coming into existence, right? So threats have also evolved. The nature of threats has evolved. The harm that they can do has also gone up from maybe say just an email threat to say a potentially hundreds and thousands and maybe millions of dollars, rupees, pounds, euro, whatever, being stolen from your account as such, right? So the threats are themselves evolving, right? And that is what makes it very, very essential for our counter threat measures to also evolve, right? So that is the thing, right? Everything is evolving, and as such we also need to go to the next level, right? We also need to evolve. We cannot, for example, uh, achieve a activity today with yesterday's knowledge. It's like that, right? So probably if we cannot fly an aeroplane, right, if we don't have today's knowledge as such, today's technology and today's knowledge. If we don't have the knowledge of this last century, so to say, right? If we just skip back 100 years, obviously they didn't have the know-how of how to go about things. Similar is the reality of cyber threats as well, right? If we don't use current contemporary measures to counter the cyber threats, then we are going to be on the back foot as such, right? So that is what we want to discuss and evolve during this session on cyber threat intelligence as such, right? So what next do we have? Let's see that, right? Let's go ahead. What are the types of cyber threats that we have? Threats can happen, as we said a few seconds or maybe minutes back. They can be in various forms. They could be viruses in the form of malware, viruses, worms, trojans, ransomware, and things like that, right? So a lot of variety is there in the type of threat that you can face. As such, your mobile phones are potential targets of these viruses or malwares. Your laptops are, your devices on the internet that are there inside your home are potential targets. Or even in your offices, right? Offices are more targets because they are, they have more data, and they have more critical data and information relating to your products, your customers, your orders, and whatever inventory you have, and such things as such, right? So yes, malware is a big issue as such, and malware is constantly evolving. It's not the same virus that attacked about 10 years ago. It's not the same virus. That virus would have evolved, just like our uh, COVID-19 virus has evolved. There are so many forms of it that have come up post the first attack by the during the pandemic. That we had COVID-1, we had COVID-2, and potentially there is something going around in the world even today around that COVID virus as such, right? So you see, even these computer-based or the internet-based viruses are also evolving as such, right? So we need to be guarded against these, right? So that is the first type of attack. Then we have the phishing attack, you know, and we have been constantly we are being bombarded, or not really bombarded, but being informed by emails from banks and government organizations to be sort of aware of phishing, what type of phishing attacks can happen and all that, right? So anybody who's got a bank account, I'm sure would have seen a email from their respective bank to protect themselves from phishing attacks as well, right? So that those are two attacks that directly impact every individual as such, virus attack or phishing attack sort of thing, right? Then at a higher level, or at a technically high level, there could be attacks like the DOS attack or the DDoS attack for that matter, right? So these are attacks that impact the servers that are hosting our applications, our data, our uh, whatever that our companies would want to host as such, internal systems, right? So all that can be impacted if there is a DDoS attack on our servers as such, right? So we talk about that as well. We talk about some things like data breaches. There have been cases. I mean, I've been sort of part of a company where the employee of the organization left his laptop in a sort of a cafe or a bar somewhere, and there was data of millions of customers on that laptop, and all that data was compromised. That happened, I mean, potentially about more than a decade ago, but it was a threat at that time, right? If something like that happens today, I'm sure it's going to be a big hue and cry over it as such, right? But yeah, so we need to sort of protect ourselves or be aware of these so that we can protect ourselves against that, right? So uh, in organizations, I mean, mostly organizations provide the laptops, right? And the people or the teams or the members of the organization work over there, right? And the laptop is very critical as such, right? So we need to be aware of this, the potential loss that we might face because of carrying a laptop around, and maybe being careless about it, right? So not all of us are, but sometimes once in a while it might just happen, and that could become a big issue as such, right? So that is true, that data breaches may happen. Then we have some insider threats. Within the organization itself, there could be some person who might be compromising the data. Less likely, but yeah, it's still likely, right? So we have to also protect against that. Something known as zero-day vulnerabilities, right? So we go into depths, a little more detail of what this means and how we can sort of protect or guard ourselves against this as such, right? Then we have advanced persistent threats. What happens is, companies are not like, they don't come up one day and they don't go down next day, right? They are like running for 50 years, 100 years maybe. So companies are long term, right? So even these hackers know that this company is existing, this is their server and sort of thing, right? They think that, at some point of time, the company may be little lax on its security, right? the web-based security, I mean, not really the physical security, the web-based security. They might think that some server is being upgraded, so security might have been put on hold for a while, things like that, right? So these attackers are just waiting for that. They are advanced persistent threats. They're just waiting for such a time, and during that time they will attack, right? And that is another issue that we need to be sort of guarded against, right? Then there are things like ransomware, and then there are botnets, and many types of different attacks can happen, right? And then we also have social engineering. I'm sure you all have heard of that term, right? We go into a little bit of depth of what is social engineering and how we can protect against that. IoT devices, right? In today's world, we are all connected to each other or to the world, so to say, with a lot of devices, right? We have a phone in our hand which connects us to the whole world. We have different devices inside our homes that are internet based, right? And all these devices could be thought of as IoT devices, Internet of Things, like devices that are things on the internet, so to say, right? And that is also a potential hole that is there in the security of our systems, right? Then, you know enterprises today work with supply chains, right? They have been around for a long time, supply chains, but they are more and more significant and important in today's time. you know because if a supply chain gets attacked or is compromised, the availability of different goods and services in different parts of the world will be impacted, right? And that could be even life threatening, for that matter, right? So for example, if there are medicines, supply chain of medicines, and if that is attacked, the supply of those medicines will be sort of halted or paused for a while, and that could be life threatening as well, right? So yes, that is a supply chain thing, and we are facing that issue. We were facing that issue during the pandemic with everything at a standstill. Goods and different services were not really as widely available as during a non-pandemic time as such, right? So yes, we want to see that as well. Then uh, we talk about intelligence, right? So what is this intelligence that we are talking about, right? So basically, what this means is cyber threat intelligence is a organized and a structured manner in which we understand these threats, right? And we analyze these threats and sort of spread that information to the related entities, right? And build up a sort of a intelligence against those attacks, right? So it provides organizations, not just your organization or not just our organization, but to the organizations around the globe. It provides them valuable insights into the evolving landscape of these threats, right? And once they are aware of it, once they have the knowledge of it, they can take some informed decisions as to how they can protect themselves against these threats as such, right? So it is a critical tool for organizations to understand, anticipate, and defend against cyber threats. It empowers them to make informed decisions and adapt to security measures as such, right? Uh, so what all does this consist of, right? So cyber threat intelligence consists of, first of all, we need to have the information as such, right? So that begins, or getting that information is by doing data collection. You get this data from different places. First of all, you will scan your own logs, the logs of your systems that are running. You check the security alerts that have been published by different organizations. You go to the open source intelligence community and get information from there, right? And also, we are humans, right? So we also have intelligence. I'm sure we all have a lot of intelligence. So yes, we also rely on human intelligence as such, right? So all these provide a lot of data. All these provide a lot of data around uh, a lot of data around the cyber threats as such, right? So once we have the data, then we do an analysis of those threats. This data is then systematically analyzed to identify certain patterns, certain flow of events that have happened, and things like that, which will give us more idea about what to expect in the coming sort of hours or days or weeks as such, right? And potentially prepare against such attacks, right? Then we have to put things in context. A threat for somebody may not be a threat for somebody else. A threat for one company may not be a threat for another company as such, right? So we have to put it in context, right, to make sense out of it as such, right? Then once some organization faces an attack or has been impacted by some cyber threat, then it can share that information about how it countered it, and that can help other organizations to protect themselves against similar attacks as such, right? So collaboratively, this will strengthen the defenses of all the organizations as such, right? So that is about information sharing, and then there are a lot of things, right? Actionable intelligence would refer to things. There are going to be 100 attacks that might happen, that are potentially likely to happen, right? But it is not necessary that all 100 have the same impact, right? Some will have a real 0.0001% impact. It's okay for my organization to take that. The cost of protecting against that would be 100 times that. So it's okay if you just come attack and do whatever you want, right? There could be other attacks which could be a little more serious as such, right? Little bit more serious, right? Which could have a 10% impact or 20% impact and sort of thing, right? So even it might be more useful to take action against that attack and not the first one, which had 0.0001% impact, right? So obviously you need to then decide upon this as to which attacks are worth giving consideration as such, right? Now that is that. And then we have timeliness. So what is timeliness? Let me give you this example, right? Where we protect our organizations by doing certain things for say 200 years, right? How that is done, I'll let you know how that is done, right? But if I've protected myself for say about say 100 or 200 years, so how we will see. But yeah, if I assume that we protected ourselves for 100 years, right? So what happens then is any attacker who is just trying to get the data or impact my systems may have a year, 2 years, 50 years, 60 years, something like that. It's okay. Let him keep trying to do that, right? So it's always comparative in that sense. How much power the other company or the other organization or person has to attack me, and how much power do I have to counter that? So if it has power of 10 years and I protected myself for 200 years, obviously that has zero impact on me as such, right? So we will see examples of that as well, how we protect ourselves in that sense, right? So that is that. And obviously the defense has to be proactive, right? So there's no point in being defensive in a reactive manner, right? So we are not defending, actually we are just correcting things that have gone wrong as such, right? So proactive defense is a big yes, like we need to be proactive in our cyber threat intelligence, right? And then customization, right? It's not that I may have an organization that has offices across the globe as such, right? So it's not that everybody across all my offices are impacted by it, right? I have to customize it in such a way that it might be very expensive to protect all the offices across the globe, right? So I just need to customize it in such a way that what is really being impacted, only that has that special protection and not the other offices, for example, as such, right? So that is that. And that is where we come into AI and ML, right? So we just saw the potential threats that we had, but now we have AI and ML that can help us to counter these. Now, what is the main and the biggest advantage of using AI and ML? There is humongous amount of data with organizations today, right? And there is humongous amount of data on cyber threats available on the internet, right? If we have to do this manually or physically, then what happens is, we might have to have a team of 200 people analyzing this data, right? And maybe even that is short, we might have a team of 2000 people analyzing that data, right? And 2000 people doing it is not going to be I mean, it's not going to be a cheap, like it's not going to be available or possible in a cheap fashion, right? We might have to spend a lot of money for that, right? And secondly, okay, I have the money, I spend the money, I employ 2000 people as well, right? The point is the data is even larger than that what 2000 people can handle. So first of all, they are not going to be sort of a match, they will not be able to match the speed at which the threat is evolving, first of all, right? Second thing is human effort is human effort is marred by human errors, right? So whatever, how many ever people we put, we cannot escape the human errors that are potentially likely to happen, right? So that is a big no-no because of the potential errors over there. And it's very expensive as well, right? And not timely, as I said, right? They would not be able to match the speed of the evolving threat as such, right? So that is where AI and ML comes in. It is an automated process sort of thing, right? It will automatically do the machine learning, and the artificial intelligence will be applied on top of it. That way, without much error, we can keep pace with the evolving cyber threat scenario as such, right? And a lot of things can happen. AIML can, remove the human error aspect from the countermeasures that we take, and it'll be a great way to do it, right? Because the cyber criminals are using AIML to do it, right? So the best way to counter that would be to use AIML in our defense mechanism as well, right? So that is that. And then we go into a little bit of details of fundamentals of AI and ML, and try to understand how these things are effective over there, right? And final session, I mean, the final part of it, we'll get into a conversation. We'll get into discussing or understanding how this was discussed by the captain and Mr. Spock on the Enterprise, and how the chief science officer, Mr. Spock, explains to Captain Kirk as to how AI and ML can be impactful or effective strategy against the evolving threats in the cyberspace, so to say, right? So this expedition which they were on was in cyberspace as such, right? So even there, obviously, there are attacks that are unprecedented and probably not even heard of and not even known as such, right? So we get into a discussion around that, how this can happen and how they can protect themselves against such things. And they also talk to the attacks that have happened on earth, right? On in our world as such, the Ukraine power grid attacks. And I told you, right, there are countries that are part of espionage against other countries, sort of thing, right? So Ukraine power grid was attacked some time back, and we talk about that. And Mr. Spock gives a lot of examples from actual industry that we have, where the Jeep company, what Jeep Cherokee's systems were attacked as such, right? So, we get into some examples of that uh, just to understand the impact and how these threats are actually manifesting in the industry right now, right? So we see some examples of aerospace and defense industry, of telecommunication, and huge names you can see there. We are going to talk about some of those as well, right? And yeah, that's what we go into the details of some of the attacks that have happened in the last couple of years as such. And that is what, right? So we try to understand this from that perspective, and we can go into as much depth as we can potentially, sort of, time may permit us, and try to see how we can sort of, gain out of the experience that the world has sort of thrown up for us to sort of capture as such, right? So yes, there's a lot of detail that we were going to talk about during this session, and we're going to make this session very, very interesting and delightful. It's going to be a out of the way learning journey, so to say, right? Where we realize that the pursuit of cyber excellence requires us to boldly face challenges and adapt the strategies as needed. It's not a static thing. It's too dynamic. It's like, constantly keeping us on our feet so that we are able to keep pace with it as such, right? So we need to do that. And, once we are there, then we go into whatever speed we want to travel in the universe as such, warp 1, warp 2, warp 3, warp 4 as such, right? So yes, with that, I would like to conclude this introduction of this session, and I would welcome you all during the training session that we are going to conduct pretty soon, and the information about that will be out soon. And I would love to see all of you all attending that session, and make it more interactive so that we learn from not just this session but also from each other's experience as well, right? So have a wonderful time, and I look forward to seeing you in the session. Okay, bye bye, see you.